Good morning, everybody. This is Miss Huval. This video is for English 2 Honors. If we were in the classroom, what we'd be doing fourth quarter is Night by Elie Wiesel. Now, last time we were in the computer lab, all of us checked out a copy of Night. So I thought, on your time off, it might be good to read the book. It is an incredible book, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So we'll start off today with some background information on Elie Wiesel, on the Jewish faith, and on the book in general. There's lots of terminology in there that you may not know if you're not familiar with Judaism itself. I know you know a lot about the Holocaust and World War I. In fact, every year when we start this book, somebody says to me, "Why are we doing another Holocaust book?" And most of the time after having read Night, the same people will say, "Okay, I've read Holocaust books before, but I've never read anything like that." So, Night is quite a profound piece of literature. It's a memoir written by Elie Wiesel in 1958. He was liberated from Auschwitz. Actually, not Auschwitz. He was liberated from the, I'm not even going to tell you which one because that'll mess it up. He was liberated from the concentration camp in 1945. Didn't write the book till 1958. He went in as a 15-year-old boy, and he was there for a year. So it's a pretty powerful piece of literature. Now, if you would, go to JPAMS and pull up the only PowerPoint that's there under Night. That's the background information. That's kind of what I'm going to be referring to as I talk to you today. I'm going to try to keep it short because we're not taking a test on this, which we would be if we were in the classroom. But I just wanted to hit the highlights with you. So once you've got the PowerPoint pulled up, you can print it out and take notes, or you can just look at it as we talk. Once you get that pulled up, we'll be ready to continue. So, Elie Wiesel is a very prolific writer. Night is actually a part of a trilogy, but he's written more than 50 books, most of them dealing with the subject matter of his life and human rights. Genocide did not end with the Holocaust, and so he's been a constant advocate for human rights. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1958. So as we begin, get your PowerPoint up. And you'll see on the first slide, we've got the Torah and a picture of Professor Wiesel. He was a professor at I think, Boston University. All right, so the first slide talks about Holocaust being a Greek word, which means sacrifice by fire. And it probably doesn't need too much more explanation. Based on what you know about the Holocaust, you know that that's an appropriate word. Okay, so the next slide is all about the Aryan race and its desire to exterminate Jews because they were thought to be the inferior race. What a lot of people don't know is that it wasn't only Jews. Now, Elie Wiesel was a Jew, but it wasn't just Jews. And so here's a list of people that you might not have known were targeted by the Nazis. In particular, the last bullet on the first column, weeding out weaknesses, perceived weaknesses, kind of shocking. Also, on the second column, I didn't know if you would understand the socialist and communist thing. Why would Nazis be against socialist and communist? Well, on the political spectrum, you have the center. You have Democrats, you have Republicans. And then at the far end of those spectrums, you have nationalism, Nazism, fascism, and you've got socialism and communism. So while you always hear about evil dictators that are communists, like Stalin or others that you know of, that's the opposite end of the political spectrum. All right, so the Aryan race. Next are basic terms of Judaism. Most of this you've probably heard before. The difference between the Torah and the Talmud, which might be of interest to you, is that the Torah is the Jewish, those are the Holy Scriptures. And it's the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Now, for the Jewish faith, and we'll talk about why more, the New Testament is not a part of their Bible, okay? The Talmud would be the teachings based on the Torah. Okay, both of those are holy and sacred. They're kept on scrolls inside of the temples. Rabbi, synagogue, pretty familiar terms to you. So, the word Messiah is a Hebrew word meaning anointed one. To the Jewish people, the Messiah has yet to come. That's very different than Christianity. In Christianity, the Messiah is Jesus Christ who has come and gone, and we're waiting, for him to come again. For the Jewish faith, that hasn't happened. The Messiah is going to come. He's going to end all evil, rebuild the temple, bring the exiles back to Israel, and usher in the world to come. Those are important things that come up in Night quite a bit. Okay? First of all, rebuilding the temple. We'll get to that shortly. But bringing the exiles back to Israel is big too, because Israel is the Holy Land for Jews. And it's also the Holy Land for many other faiths. So we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So the name of God is holy and not uttered for a lot of really observant Jews. And you'll see that in Night, a lot of times the name of God is not mentioned. He's referred to as the Mighty One, the Master of the Universe, things like that. And the reason is that the name of God is so holy. It's sometimes not mentioned and not written for fear of blasphemy. So your next slide talks about the Jewish Holy Land. Those are two maps of Israel. One is modern day, and I say modern day, it's 1993, and the borders of these kinds of things are pretty fluid. But ancient Israel is on the right-hand side, and you can see the 12 tribes of Israel there. So all this slide talks about is how things go back to Abraham. And Abraham had two sons. He had with Sarah, Isaac, and Ishmael with Hagar. And so a lot of the religious division in the Middle East comes from those two lines. I thought you might find that interesting. They both feel entitled to the Holy Land because they both feel that they were promised it by God. The next slide is the temple. Okay, now the photograph you see there are the actual steps that are still there that you can see. So this is the background of the temple, and it's important because in Night you're going to find him, Elie Wiesel, the narrator and the main character, weeping over the destruction of the temple and praying for the Messiah who's going to come and rebuild it. And so you're like, what temple are they talking about? Well, we're talking about Jerusalem. We're talking about the main temple. It was built there by Jacob. It was destroyed, rebuilt by Solomon, big figures from the Old Testament if you know your Bible. And it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. All right? The Jews were exiled from Jerusalem, briefly took it back in 1967. Now there's a mosque on that site, but the stairs remain. If you ever get to go, you can go see them. Okay, so the next slide is some interesting facts about Judaism. We talked about the homeland being Israel. 618 commandments, which is kind of interesting, called mitzvah. Many of them deal with interpretations of the laws that are laid down in Torah. Dietary laws are a big part of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So there are many different forms of Judaism. I have a few listed for you today. Orthodox, conservative, and Reform. Orthodox would be the most strict, going down to Reform Judaism. And I would say that Elie Wiesel and his family would fall in that Orthodox category. Yeah. So the next slide deals with dietary laws from the Torah. Okay, so there's this word kosher, which you've probably heard before, dealing with pickles and hot dogs. However, kosher means clean. It's a Hebrew word meaning clean. And very observant Jews eat kosher. The opposite of kosher is treif. So on the slide there, you'll see the acceptable animals for them to eat. Cloven hooves that chew cud. All right? There's also, once you've got a piece of meat that is from the right kind of animal, has to be butchered a certain way. Certain nerves and fats were removed in kosher butchering. And so an animal can't die of natural causes to be kosher. That would make it treif or torn. Another interesting thing about Jewish dietary laws is the no mixing of the dairy and the meat. So they cannot be cooked, served, or eaten together. That goes for meat and dairy, or meat and fish. So in a very Orthodox, observant Jewish household, you might have 2 sets of flatware. Okay, if not, you would have to wash your dishes in the sink, but not in the same place that you would wash meat dishes. So dairy dishes have to be kept separate. So there may be separate sinks, separate dishwashers, separate sets of flatware, etc., etc. Okay. All right, so we get to night on the next slide, and the setting when we begin is in Siget, which is Transylvania. There's a picture of it there. There's a map on where it would be in modern terms. Okay. Now, what happened in Transylvania was that after World War I, Transylvania became a part of Romania, and they fell under fascist rule and actually allied with the Nazis in Germany in World War II. But the price of that alliance was their Jews. And so everyone who was a Jew in his town was rounded up and sent, they thought, to a brick factory. But as it turned out, it was Auschwitz. So there's a map there. You can see it, where it kind of would be in modern times. All right, next is a map of Germany and Poland. So you can see where Auschwitz is. That's where he began. Buchenwald is the second arrow. He went to that one as well and made his way ultimately to one called Gleiwitz. All right, so there's some important terminology there for you. The difference between the SS and the Gestapo is important, so pay attention to that. Those of you who read The Merchant of Venice know that the ghettos were actually in Venice, where the Jews were forced to live. So there's some Jewish holidays which come up in the book. Yom Kippur is a big one, and Rosh Hashanah. Of course, you've heard of Hanukkah and Passover. All right, so this last slide talks about Shekinah, which is the Jewish term for, I guess, the Holy Spirit. And Kabbalah is the study of Jewish mysticism. That plays prominently in chapter 1 of Night, where Elie wants to study Kabbalah, and his dad is opposed to it because he feels like the study of something so abstract and so deep and so mystic might cause him to question and ultimately lose his faith. So that's a little background on Night. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll read chapter 1. My next video will talk about